Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping middle managers and their supervisors embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I am one of your hosts, John Clark, and in a YMOP YMOP.
Yeah, hey, this would be a shout out.
Josh Hugo, is this a new sponsor?
No, so it's Young Men of Purpose. It's a organization Rico went created here in Denver, and it's going into, probably 15 years almost now, and they serve students in middle and high school students of color, primarily African-American students, Black students, and have created just a really powerful community of young men who have gone on to do great things after secondary education through college in enterprise and entrepreneurial spaces. So yeah, great organization here out of Denver. I recommend you check them out. I don't actually have a website or anything for them. I'll put that in the comments.
What do they, what do the young men that are part of this engage with or do? Is it kind of just like community and
good question.
Connection, or do they do things within the community? What's kind of...
Yeah, a lot of it's school-based. And so we brought Young Men of Purpose into our school that I was working at like 5 years ago, and they would come in 2 days a week. Rico and Dwayne were two of the primary guys who would present, but they would do a class. We had a class-based model. So they would come in and students had 2 days a week of this course, and they would learn about leadership. They'd learn about how to live with intention and purpose and address topics of challenge in the community, topics of challenge to growing up as young people of color. So it's a really cool organization. If you're ever interested in learning more, you can definitely send me a message. I'm happy to connect you with them. Yeah.
If they're ever interested in starting a follow-up to that called MMOP, Middle-Aged Men of Purpose, that would be something I would...
MMOP. Yeah.
MOP. Okay. There we go.
Purpose-driven work for sure. And it's a cool group.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome. I mean, that's good little banter there that can actually lead us into the power of influence, right? So, but before we jump into that and kind of bridge us from last week to this, we want to just ask people to download and subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, leave comments. We're going to keep saying that every week in the hopes that even one comment that we can utilize on here and respond to it helps our discussion, and share with as many people as possible. Find clips of it, send those for thought partnership with others, to debate, to spar with, like use it with your leadership team to say where people disagree or like what we're saying. And hopefully it's just a way of getting above that level of sometimes the tactical things that take up our day to day and a little bit more into the thinking piece of what good leadership and middle management is. So yeah, so excited to get going. Josh, turning it to you to help us reflect back on last week and lead us into today's topic.
Yeah, thanks, John. So last week was the 9 types of influence, different approaches that we all take to create impact with others. Hopefully the influence types that we covered gave you something to think about. And that was more or less the question for homework last week is, do you attach more closely to some of those styles? And if so, which ones? Do you possibly use some too often or maybe only use a couple? And as a result, what's the impact of that? So that was last week, which is a great tie into this week, where we're going to actually kind of keep the conversation going and focus a little less on types or archetypes of influence, but a little bit more on what is the real goal of influence, and the concept of relationship, and then some of the things that can get in the way of actually creating influence impact through relationship. But we thought it would be important to actually sit on this word relationship a little bit more, because it's often used in many different ways. And I think sometimes it's shorthand for something that is maybe not what we intend it to be used for when we think about this through the realm of leadership and management. So I actually just want to open up the question, and I think we're just going to talk through this, but when you really think about the word relationship, what do you think we really mean, John?
Yeah. It's going to be it's a big word, right? And I think I'm laughing. We, talked about this a bit beforehand, and we kind of said, let's just go live with this and see what comes of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we have some bulleted list of like, here's the perfect type of relationship to engage with to ensure your teams work well. So I think the first thing I would note is I do think, in the time that I've been a leader or kind of grown up in the work world, I think we were kind of in the midst of sometimes when the idea of how relationships in the workplace work changed, frankly. I would say over the last 20 years or so, that's been different than it was like definitely during my parents' real generation for the most part. And I think that's probably good for the good, right? I think the idea of relationship as a form of trust is what I want to get to and kind of talk about. And so, like, what does it mean to build a relationship that's anchored in trust, right? Especially in a work
Mhm.
environment. But I do want to talk about, I think, where sometimes the challenges are is that when people read or listen to things, and so much of everything's bite sized. So somebody will come across something on LinkedIn that's like, or any social media of when you don't have a relationship with someone, then, and you don't like them, then you can't learn from them or you won't be motivated by them. And then somebody's head immediately turns to, well, yeah, in order for me to have a good relationship with someone, I have to like them and they have to be nice to me. And I think just people get conflated with relationships that are familial or friendships and then try to apply that in the workspace sometimes. And I think they're very different. And I actually think in most corners of your life, a family relationship is very different than a friendship, which is very different than the people you work with. And so, all that to say is, I think sometimes people are limited by how they think about relationship and expect it to be like a fuzzier, friendly version of that in the workplace versus, I think, something that actually anchors us in trust. So we all feel like we can be our best versions of ourselves here. And so, yeah, I'll turn it to you a little bit because I don't want to ramble on myself too long and maybe I'll have some other thoughts. But I think that's the challenge that sometimes I have is people think about relationship they don't quite go far enough in terms of what it has to mean when you're on a team or working towards a mission or something together. And we just stop there like, well, if I get along and I'm friendly with everyone on my team, then we'll have a good team. And actually, I don't
Yeah.
think that's always the case, frankly. So
Yeah. I think friendliness and nice are elements of that can contribute to a healthy relationship, but if that is the foundation of your relationship, it's it's probably an issue.
yeah, I mean, I think if you gave me certainly the balance of like cruel versus kind, I'm going to tell you 100% of the time that focusing on kindness towards others
Yeah,
is going to give you more in a relation. It's going to get you more with people than cruelty. You mentioned maybe we can go to this one, but there's a big difference between kind of kind and how we might think
yeah,
about that
let's
versus
talk about
nice, versus nice. And like some people hear about nice and they're like, well, that's fine. And actually, no, there's like actually maybe some insidiousness to niceness that doesn't get you as far as you want with
yeah,
people,
let's
or it doesn't actually anchor you in trust, right?
Let's talk about kind. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that you brought that out. I would say that there's a big difference between nice and kind. And I think that nice is nice until it's not. Nice is often an avoidant or a distancing concept of like, well, for me to be nice to this person, it means that I probably shouldn't say this thing that I have been thinking about telling them. And kindness requires clarity. Kindness in a relationship, I actually think, is a good quality and a necessity because kindness requires that you tell somebody a thing that maybe is hard, but you would want somebody to tell you, right? For example, if your breath is really bad and somebody never tells you that, like it's a kind thing to say, hey, I know this is not something that, is easy to share, but I think that your breath isn't very good.
Your
And
breath is stank. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
right. But
But
if
I
you
love
never
you.
say that, how many of us sit on things like that all of the time in our own personal relationships? Not about that example per se, but just in general, like things that bother us. And because we're afraid to be clear and kind, we say, well, it's just nice for me to not say anything. And John
Yeah.
and I are both Midwesterners, and Midwestern culture is kind of historically nice.
Yeah.
And we kind of just like internalize these things that bother us and kind of say, well, stoicism requires we don't say something like this. But I actually think a healthy relationship professionally, personally requires kindness, and kindness requires
Yeah.
being clear about things that other people might need to know, that feedback, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And let's stick with this example of things like there's something in your teeth or your breath stinks or something like that. Or because it seems small, but I think that helps to build up to bigger things that you might have to give people feedback on. If you're nice and you're like, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Actually, what you're doing there is you don't want to have the pain of like,
Right.
it's about you actually. Like,
About
I
you.
don't want to have the discomfort of having to tell this person that thing. Like, you're actually, in that case, you think you're thinking about the other person and not wanting to make them uncomfortable. But actually, what's happening is you're thinking about yourself. A kind person actually kind of goes beyond themselves and they say, basically, I care enough about you to let you know this so you can fix it. So, somebody broccoli in your teeth, I think most people would probably say, like, like I've grown older and I've grown comfortable enough to let people know that. Fine. But what about the thing where somebody's work habits are really impacting the team, but that person doesn't know it because they're spinning their wheels on the things that they shouldn't be, and it's impacting your workflow? And what people tend to do is they just let that keep happening. And I'm actually anchoring this in a conversation I had with someone, but it's anchoring them. What they do is they keep doing this, and you never have that conversation with them to say, hey, I know you're working hard, but you're working on the wrong things.
Right.
And it's actually slowing us down. And I want to work with you to like change course so we can get on the right thing. People don't want to do that because they think it's going to make that person feel bad. And I'm going to argue, actually, what you don't want is you don't want to have the discomfort of having to let someone know that like you believe in them enough that they could do it differently or better. So yeah, that's the thing I think people need to ask themselves is, am I not moving, communicating this to this person truly because I'm worried about how they will receive it? Or actually, it's actually about how I feel. It's actually about me.
And you're right. And most
Yeah.
of the time it's that. And I think that that's such an important piece of tying this back to influence, because truly influencing somebody else has to be in the spirit of serving them and serving the relationship. And I think the healthiest relationships you have are when you're getting out of the way of your own desires, your own wants, your own needs. Doesn't mean you can't speak to, I would like this and I do need this. But I think that distinction there of what you said, John, is so important, is that as we build relationship with our teams, with our boss, with the people who report to us, that it's so important that you are taking accountability for your own self and not kind of subversively passing off your own desires onto others as if it is for them. And I think that kind of nuance is important because frankly, we feel it when we're on the receiving end of somebody who you actually know is trying to make it sound like it's your idea, but it's really about them. Or somebody avoided saying something because they're like, I didn't want to make you feel bad, but it was really because they didn't want to make themselves feel bad. So on the receiving end of this, we all know what it's like to be around a person who pretends that the relationship is healthy, but it's not, because we know they're not being forthright. We know they're holding on to something. We know that they're not truly caring for our well-being. And so I
Yeah.
think that's so important you brought that out. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And we talked last week about 9 types of influence, right? And I think what we thought beforehand is actually we think there's like a really good connection of those, that there are like specific ways that you can approach someone based on the circumstances. Like, this is a right spot to motivate through data. This is the right time to connect about like our shared relationship with each other, and like the appeal that you have to me and I have to you. Or this is the right time to really do this because it's really important to the people that we serve. It's important to the students in our school, or it's important to our clients, or it's important to whoever, the university I work for, whatever it might be. But all of those, you can pick and choose from all of those. But I think you and I talked about what we probably agree is there is a foundational base layer of relationship that has to underscore all of those, right? For you to then use that, any of those, to influence someone, even for me to influence you because of our relationship,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes what people think is the only type of influence, and the best type is we have a deep relationship and you like me, and so you do it. And that's the only way to be a good manager, is to get people to trust and or to get people to like you. And I don't know that people always have to like you, but they do have to trust you. They do have to believe that you have the best hope for them as a
Right.
person in terms of what they can achieve, but that they can help achieve what the team and the group and the organization needs. Not just like, I want to make you feel good. And so I'm willing to not actually make you be the best version of yourself because I just want us to like each other. That's when I've been at my worst, is when I'm like, if I can get this person to like me and believe in me, then they'll do whatever I want. No, it has to go beyond that. You have to show them I'm willing to challenge you too. And I hope you're willing to challenge me. Right.
Right.
And that's when we're actually working and building a relationship that's founded in my belief in you, my hope for your development and growth, and ultimately our work together to influence whatever outcome we need to influence. Right. So I'd say it kind of fits into that Lencioni model of, if there's no trust, then you can't get to the outcomes that your team wants.
Right.
Right. That is not to say that, again, I just want to and I've probably said it too many times, I want people to not think that relationship is that's kind of the only way to influence, but it's the foundation by which you kind of work to influence people based on the needs or because you know them that you know is going to motivate them, right?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's important to keep an eye on your intentions and your motives. And so, what we're going to, I think we can shift over here to, we tried this last week. We're going to put some videos up this week for those who do like watching podcasts or would just be interested in complementing what you listen to with the visuals. We threw some visuals in last week. We're going to do it again this week. But I think what we're really going to get at here is the idea of like what can get in the way of being effective with influence. And last week we kind of introduced this on the level of if you only try to influence one way, that's going to get
Yeah.
in the way. The other is that what we just talked a little bit about here is that if the role or the goal, I should say, of your influence isn't truly to bring out the best in another person, which is again one of the core elements of great relationship with another person, to be kind of fighting for their highest good, that's going to get in the way. What I'm going to share a little bit here on the screen as we talk through it is also the role of self-preservation that can get in the way. When those things all happen, if the pure version of influence is like I'm going to, as a leader, I'm going to try to influence you to create impact and foster relationship. If that is the ideal state, what often is happening is if that breaks down, it becomes a transactional kind of a transactional relationship, which is not a healthy relationship. Or what happens is influence breaks down because the person you're trying to influence just doesn't trust you.
Yeah. Well, while you're pulling that up, why don't you go and
Yeah,
pull it
please.
up? And I, it's making me think like one of the types of influence we talked about last week was the third party appeal, and we talked a little bit about the idea of like, oh, it's about your customers, right? Like as one example, we're gonna do it because it's what our customers like. It was the argument for a relationship to undergird that is if you and I have no relationship, and I just come to you and it's like, hey, clients say they want this, do it now, whatever. You're showing like in that case, you're saying like, I don't actually care about you. They want it, so I'm focused on them because whatever they pay us money or they buy our product or wherever it might be. There is a way to do that. Says like, hey, as a team, we've really worked to understand why our clients and our partners are important to us, and they need us to shift something because it's impacting them this way. And I know we want to help them because of the work we've done. How do we want to go about doing that? And how can we set ourselves up well, but still to serve their purpose? Very
Mhm,
different than when you just come to someone and say, get it done because they've asked us to. Like, I think there's a way to do it because I think that's one where people think, well, that's not about relationship, that's about others. And I would disagree. I think it's about the way that you've built a relationship and an understanding about how do we all connect about the people we're serving or working for. Um, so that when we come together, because that needs to be a form of motivation, we're all in alignment that it matters. So anyway, just
mhm.
a thought there as you were talking made sense. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally. Well, let's keep talking through it. I think as we go through this model too, I think bringing in
yeah,
examples from last week will be helpful. So the model that for those who are watching this can see on the screen is essentially thinking about a two people. One person who is you, and the other is the person who you're working to influence. And so really what is happening is again in a super healthy relationship, you're going to trust that other person fully, so you don't have these walls of self-preservation that pop up. But if you're building relationship, and even with somebody you've known for a while, there's self-preservation that can absolutely creep in. And so I think that it's not just an early relationship or a new relationship, but frankly any relationship. As humans, we have a tendency to potentially put up a wall of self-preservation.
mm-hmm. Wait, can I ask you a question
Yeah,
about that?
John,
Like
please. Yeah.
cynicism, like, is that a byproduct of self-preservation? Like, tell me how you think about cynicism in that is
Yeah.
like when we see
Right.
that, I see, and this is making me reflect on myself. I see cynicism and I'm like, that person's a jerk. Like, why are they so negative? Why don't they believe anything? When actually, maybe it's just them saying, like, I'm going to do whatever I can right now to put up my guard because I don't want to build trust in something that's just going to bite me in the butt.
Yeah.
Or maybe I
Yeah,
need to
that's a
switch
great
when I see cynicism, okay, this is that person showing some self-preservation, what do I need to adapt to them? I mean, I know this might be throwing us off, but
No, it's a good
yeah,
question. I mean, here's how I would answer it. So again, visually, for those looking, you can see the questions here. For those who are listening, I think three core questions that apply to
yeah,
self-preservation. And this again is some of the work that I do in the giant space, but I think these are really good. Cynicism might fit under these three, but what am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove to whom? And I think cynicism could be buried under any of those? I mean, John, when you think of your own personal example that you're coming up with there, where might you say my cynicism is stemming from one of these questions? And if so, which one might it be for you?
Oh man, I mean, of course it depends on the context. I would probably say one for me that's a big one that I feel pops up for me a lot is what am I trying to prove and to whom? You
Mm,
know what I mean? Like, and so I think, we've talked about Brene Brown a lot, but when she talks about the armored leadership, one that really aligns to me is hustle for your worth, right? And
mhm.
so I operate in a way of, well, I'm just going to take care of myself and show people all the work I'm doing so that they can like really feel connected to that and say, well, John's working hard, I'll work hard. Or like, oh, well, John's not an idiot. Like, look at him working hard. And
Mhm.
so it prevents me from maybe getting as strategic as I need to, or about actually getting voice from others and collaborating in a way that's true collaboration versus just like some quick touch points. Right. So I don't know, just like on the spot, that's one that comes to mind. How about you?
Yeah, I'm just going back to the idea of cynicism, right? And
Yeah.
cynicism, I think, could be what are you afraid of losing is possibly
Yeah.
your own credibility, right? So you're like, oh, well, it's easier to be cynical about this person's, quality of work because if I were to accept the fact that their quality of work could be as good as mine, I'm afraid of losing like the position here of actually having more knowledge than somebody
Yeah.
else. And so well, this person's coming out of that school of thought. Anyone who's thinking about something from that side of the table can't be right. So, gosh, I'm just gonna like outright discount somebody because
Totally.
if I embrace their expertise, it might make me lose some degree of standing in this case, right? So that's just one of the thoughts I had, and I do the same. I mean,
Totally. I was thinking about as an example, if you've been a teacher, which all of us have, I work with zookeepers right now too, which is interesting, like on the ground working with animals. When there's new changes at the top about anything about the way we're going to teach a lesson or the way we're going to structure the care for a certain animals or we're going to change up this exhibit, what happens first? The people who are at their garden, they don't know what it's like for us on the ground floor to execute that now based on the way they said that. You know what I mean? Um, so that's some of that. And so you see cynicism come out from people, and not to just put it all on teachers or zookeepers. Like when I was a principal, principals did this all the time too. I did it. Like networks making us do this thing. They don't know how hard that's going to be to enact that action at an actual school with actual kids. They're just sitting in their ivory tower, on Zoom chats talking about it while we're actually down here sweating a bit, So that
yeah,
may not be
yeah.
fair, but that's where people who are receiving that, they start with that cynicism. So, yeah,
So
good
I think
point.
that's a good example to bring up. So to kind of go back, so self-preservation gets in the way of building influence, and both parties in a relationship, in a healthy relationship, have let those walls down. But as a building relationship is happening as a manager, you're a
I was gonna say,
manager,
let's talk about like this way. Let's think about the two people aren't just like vague people. It's a manager and the person they're managing.
right? So
Let's
you're
use that
yeah.
like,
Let's ground it in this. So you're a manager, and you have a new report, and there's somebody that you've kind of had on the team for a few months. And let's just go ahead and say that you are trying to work through influence by bringing them up to speed on this new company initiative. And let's say this is a sales team, and you're the manager of this new sales rep. And what they are trying to do, the company is trying to do, is saying that every week you have to have 15 in-person meetings in your regional area. So 3 meetings a day with 3 clients, and that's a change. Maybe you've been a virtual only company and now all of a sudden you're in the field, or maybe there was no expectation of in-person meetings as long as you just talked to somebody or emailed with somebody. So let's just call this the change. You're the manager, this is the salesperson, and you're trying to create some influence. And so in this model as kind of seen on the screen, let's say it's me. I'm the manager, and my tendencies from an influence model are to operate with character and chemistry. And so from thinking we don't have to do it right now, but maybe as I'm sharing this, John, you can be thinking about a few of these 9 types of influence from last week. Some of those lean towards a person who's going to really lead with character. So I'm going to try to win you over with a little bit of a joke. I'm going to really try to get to know you as a person. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'm going to come into this conversation with my new sales rep, really trying to kind of think about my instinctive skills of building chemistry and operating for my character with others. Well, that's great if this person is somebody who receives communication from others where character and chemistry are important to them. Now, if they are, perhaps we've hit this off right off the bat. I've lowered my wall of self-preservation. I've really tried to build relationship, and this other person has said, "Yeah, I can get behind this person. I operate through that framework."
Hmm.
Now, on the flip side, if I'm the manager, me, Josh, trying to, help this new sales rep understand this change to their practice, and I start off with like, "Hey, how's your family doing? Can't wait to talk about the Bears game from last week or the Broncos game or whatever it is." And this person is sitting there saying, "Hey, I need this guy who is across the table from me to tell me the facts, to give me the plan,
Yeah.
to show me the reasons why, the data as to why this new method of consultative sales is important to be in person." And Josh is over there making jokes about the Broncos and talking about his family and asking me about mine. And I'm just super uncomfortable because I'm a competency, credibility first sort of person. My wall of self
Yeah.
preservation is way up. And so, what ends up happening in this dialogue is I'm over there trying to create some influence through my own tendencies, and their wall is up. All of a sudden, there is no influence or impact. This has bounced back as what feels to be a very transactional sort of dynamic between me and the sales rep because I was unaware at the moment that my tendencies and their tendencies were quite different. So I just want to pause on that and kind of get your reactions to how that's been shared.
Yeah. Well, I think I can go out. I can also kind of talk
Hey,
through the
wherever you
inverse of
want.
that, but like you ended last week. We talked about those 9 influence types, and you made mention of when we shared the um the format for it. They had these like declarative statements, right? And you said, "Hey, there's a lot more about like using questioning and dialogue to work through influence in any of these than there is like do it because of X, Y, and Z, right?" And we know that. And when you talk about that, and like you're meeting with this person, because I was like, man, how if you're new to managing someone, how do you know if they want the character or chemistry, if they want the competence and credibility? You don't have to figure that out right away. You just have to figure it out. Like you have to understand what the balance they're looking for is, right? And it's probably a bit of both. And you're gonna have to get to the credibility and competency point, even if this person lays completely on character and chemistry, because like that's part of what's going to help them to like get the thing done. So, as an example, I'll use your example, and let's say just the inverse of that is I want to approach this. I know that this person coming in is really challenged by the idea of 15 of these in-person meetings a week or whatever it might be. I might determine, hey, the right way to go about this right now is to share my competency of like I've met challenges like this before and I have credibility because I've overcome them. And so you might start a healthy way is like you engage them in that, like, hey, I know what you affirm that this is a new challenge for them, that it's not impossible, but like you
Mhm.
recognize it's a shift. Let me share with you some ways that I've thought about this in the past. It wasn't perfect, but I want to share how you did it. You could build competency and credibility. You could also say, like, well, boohoo, like, look, I've done this before. Or actually, when I was doing it, it was even worse. We had 40 of these we had to do, right?
Mhm.
And you think you're building competency, you're showing them your competency, but all you're doing is you're getting them to hate you because they think you're hubristic, that you're
Right.
not seeing it from
That's
their
right.
perspective. You're just talking about, well, it's me. And so in that case, even if that person wanted the competency and credibility thing, it wasn't rooted in understanding what they're facing and how you can help them. It was rooted in like, well, I overcame a challenge and so should you. So, you know, um, it is definitely about striking a balance about the character and chemistry and the competency and credibility and leaning. It's never 100% one or the other, but it's
Can't
finding the
be.
right lean
That's
towards
right.
the other one based on the person. I like that.
That's
That's
right.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it can't yeah, and I think you're right. It's about knowing the other person, learning about these styles, asking the questions. And so kind of the visual for what we just talked about is when the other person's wall of self-preservation has gone up. And that's often because the approach that you have taken is perhaps not matching the style that they more naturally would hear. And over time, as trust is built, that wall is at a lower resting place for both parties. But as a new manager with a new person, it is just kind of an element of human nature to say, I'm not going to say I'm a naturally distrusting person, but there's just an element of like, you don't have that depth and that thickness of relationship and experience in the past to say, well, it won't take a whole lot coming out of the gates to kind of move that wall up to the highest levels, because its resting location, if you
Yeah.
will, is already kind of high, because you're just not trusting of a new person yet, and that's,
Yeah.
I think,
And well,
partially.
we're also talking about it mostly in a like, oh, I'm a new manager to you sort of space. But even if you've been working with someone for a long time, what happens is the wall of self preservation is going to flux based on what's being asked of them.
That's right.
Like, hey, you're actually being challenged with like this kind of new ask or this new way of doing it. Boop, there goes the wall of self
Right.
preservation, because they're like,
That's
what,
right.
your point of like, what am I losing? What am I trying to hide?
Yeah.
And it may not even be that like they don't believe in what's being asked of them. They're scared that they won't be able to do it. Right. And so a question for you is like, how would you, as a manager, would you argue like, hey, as a manager, because of your unique role, it is your job to think about the wall of self-preservation and to find a way to lower yours? Like I kind of would. I would say if you're a manager, it is actually your job to lower your wall of self-preservation and assume and be okay with the fact that others who are individual contributors are going to have theirs up, and it's your work to draw them in. Like, I actually think that's your responsibility as a
Yeah.
manager. I think sometimes managers get in the space of like, well, they're being jerks about it. I'm asking them to do something and they're getting all defensive. Like, why
Yeah.
should I even care about them?
You bring Oh,
They
yeah.
just need to do their damn job. And I'm like, ugh, you actually have the responsibility to bring yours down. Like you can't do
Absolutely, and
that,
I'm so
right?
glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
because so the first wall that we talked about, as I've kind of been walking through this, and for the visual folks, you're kind of seeing this screen change. But the first wall of preservation we started with was the other. So this new sales rep, and kind of thinking about what actions we take to help them lower theirs. And that's that balance of figuring out whether you're going to lead through character, chemistry, competency, credibility, which of the 9 types are you using too much. But I think, John, you brought up the next point here, which is you also have a wall of self-preservation as the sales manager. And so you might be looking at this relationship of, well, what do I have to lose? Is I'm going to ask them to do something that I'm internally a little bit torn on. And if I go out of the gates with like really clear expectations, I might lose my own integrity, because I actually am a little bit torn on this. So I'm just going to hedge. And so I'm not actually going to come into this with clear-sightedness or with deep belief in what I've been asked to do as this new man, as this manager. So my own wall of self-preservation is personally up because I'm afraid of losing integrity. And so I have to wrestle with that. Or what am I trying to prove? So perhaps I'm trying to I don't want to do 15 visits a week as a sales manager. And if I go into this with
Mm.
a certain belief of like, well, I know I'm not going to do that myself. I'm trying to prove that I can do this, but I really don't want to. I'm afraid of doing it. My wall is already up. So I'm coming into this meeting with my own fears, right? To your point, John. I'm coming into this. So I haven't even given a chance for my character and chemistry to make an impact in a relationship. My own wall is all the way up. So it becomes transactional. And I partially am just really fighting for my own, like, well, if John becomes really good at giving 15 sales calls a week and I kind of suck at that, he's going to take my job. And so I'm going to kind of, half-ass this message, or I'm going to backtrack on the clarity, or I might even sabotage it by kind of saying, well, it feels optional, John. I don't really know what HQ wants on this one. If you can do it, great. And if you can't, but in my head, I actually know what the truth is. I've put my wall all the way up. I've made this a transactional situation. I'm not actually going to be operating with influence in the first place. It's frankly, it doesn't matter where their self-preservation wall is.
Yeah.
I've already blocked it from the start, because I'm not coming into this for them. I'm
Yeah.
coming into this for me.
It's also like I'm going back a few episodes where we talked about um the hero and the other things. One thing you might say is like, oh, I'll do 5 of those calls for you. I'll do 5 of them for you. And
Mm,
you think this kind of goes back to earlier in the conversation, we were talking about nice and kind, and then like actually, yeah, that, but is that the right influence and the right relationship you want? Like, no, I want to help you strategize around it, but I can't take that from you, because what gets lost that actually hurts me and hurts our, like, it makes me upset that I'm taking on more work eventually, or you get to a point where you feel like, oh, if I just kind of am upset enough, I know my manager
Will
will
do
take
it
that
for
off
me.
of me. So it's an interesting balance too, because you might say like,
Good. Yeah,
oh, good,
great.
that's going to help us lower the wall of self-preservation because they're going to know I'm going to help them, and then we're good. But it's just that's why I don't have an answer for that. But I think it's a one that you have to make sure like don't think you're lowering them by being a hero, right?
Right. I think that's such a great your wall of self-preservation is high if you're trying to rescue somebody, because remember, when you're trying to rescue somebody, you're not actually trying to rescue them, you're trying to save your own ass from all of the frustrations
Feeling
of
bad.
having an incompetent or less competent person you're working across from. Your motives in a rescue mode are to overfunction because it actually is about you, and that kind of is a perfect way to kind of put an end to today's conversation. I think you can have the last word on it, but I think when that goes back to relationship, right? And if your goal is to truly be for somebody else, you have to be able to stand with the discomfort. It might cause another person to have to learn how to do something that might be a little bit hard on you as a manager watching them learn it. But the moment you're jumping in to solve somebody else's problem, to rescue somebody else from a problem that they ultimately need to be doing themselves, you're kind of operating from a place of self-preservation as opposed to truly fighting for their highest good. So that's another way that influence breaks down, is if you're trying to rescue. So I love how there's so many ways a model like this can tie to all of the stuff that we've talked about. So glad it kind of sparked a little bit of conversation here.
Yeah, no, I would encourage people to find this image, and we'll, it's on YouTube because we're sharing it, but then also hopefully Josh can find a way to share a link to it or something like that that people can do. We'll figure it out. But I love this idea of like we're kind of balancing out character and chemistry along with competency and credibility in terms of how you bring walls down. And I think it kind of fits in perfectly with last week, because I think a lot of the influence types we talked about, they kind of leaned more on what you would say was character and chemistry. Do it for the team, do it because of our relationship. And others that were more on the competency or the credibility, do it because of the data, do it because that's what our clients are saying, do it because I'm the expert, right? We talked about that one.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
those all play in there, and finding the right time to use each of those or the balance of those fits in with this and helps to lower the walls. But again, it is grounded in, do I understand what this person needs at this moment? Am I going there? But to this point, ensure that by being nice, it's actually not just about self-preservation, because it is. You might think like, oh, I'm putting down walls and putting down barriers, and actually you're putting yours up because you just don't want to deal with the conflict of it. So awesome stuff. I think for homework, thanks for bringing this, Josh. I really like this conversation. I think we want you to think about a person on your team and their particular communication styles and tendencies. And is your approach to building influence potentially causing them to put up a wall of self-preservation, right? And are you investing enough in a relationship that is kind but pushes them along with yourself to get uncomfortable at times, so that like impact and influence can actually be there? And so, you know, really think about that. Ensure that like you're asking yourself this way of like, ways am I bringing down their wall of self-preservation, but am I actually intentionally lowering mine as well, so that we can get to real impact in our relationship with each other?
Yeah.
Good
Good
stuff.
luck on the homework. This is a great place to leave questions for us too. If you're like, can you go back on the next episode and clarify, or hey, just send us an email or a message on
Or give
your,
us examples of things that you're doing.
yeah.
We'd love to hear that more. You don't have to mention people's names, but man, if you have a way that you do it, I mean, Josh and I, clearly we're just spitballing ideas here. We don't do it
Yeah.
perfectly all the time. So
Or,
we'd
I
love
mean,
to hear.
if you're trying to get fired and get severance, go ahead and mention some names of people, and
Yeah, there we
we'll
go.
live workshop it. We'll air some dirty laundry for you, and we'll take 10% off the top of that severance package. But all jokes aside, until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and the tools for the journey. See you in the in between.